Think not of the morrow. It's been nearly 20 years since I had a conversation that would change my life. 20 years since that boy came into my office and told me perhaps the most fantastical story I would ever hear all of my life. A story that struck in my mind so clearly all these years, of course. I didn't believe it then. But now, after so many years, after the life that I've lived since that conversation, I cannot help but think back to that day with guilt and regret, and now finally, fear. I was a headmaster then at primary school in North Hampshire. About 6 years away from retiring. A boy called Chris was sent into my office for locking two other boys in the tech cupboard, a room where we kept equipment for the science lessons taught at the school. I knew of him. Knew he was a good student. He'd once shared some work in a school assembly. He had seemed to me quite bright and a little shy. Not so that day. He was making a great fuss. I remember about him being sent to me. It's not right. It isn't right. He repeated over and over as Judy, his teacher, practically carried him in. She explained the situation to me and then left to get back to her class. I remember as I sat silently at him. I silently stared at him from behind my desk. The stern look I reserved for such situations across my face. Again and again he said it. This isn't quite right. This isn't supposed to happen like this. He looked odd, panicked, and upset. Though not in the way you would expect a 10-year-old to be on being sent to the headmaster's office. His eyes darted back and forth, as my own have many times when in bursts of rapid thought. Eventually I spoke over him. Christopher, this is very disappointing. I always used the student's full first name when giving them a telling off. It sounds so much more serious. He took little notice and carried on repeating those same words, glancing this way and that, looking utterly confused. Christopher, look at me when I'm speaking to you. I remember I raised my voice, almost as a shout, as I said his name the last time. Something I rarely did. His eyes stepped onto me as he fell silent. I expected to see them gloss over. It's a dreadful thing to make a child cry, and so I began again in a calm tone. It's disappointing to have you sent. Look, something's gone wrong somewhere. This isn't supposed to happen like this. I was shocked to be interrupted, but what startled me, what left me speechless for those moments as he carried on, was the way he spoke. His voice was that of a young boy, to be sure, but as if under the control of someone far older. His enunciation was clear and precise. His tone somehow mature and serious. I just need a moment to think. I can sort this out. I just need to think. His eyes went back and forth, darting to and fro. I had found my voice by now. I expect you to listen when I am talking to you, young man. Do not interrupt me when I am speaking. His eyes fixed on my own again. He spoke before I could continue. Sure, okay. Just give me 5 minutes to talk, okay? 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. I'm not sure what made me do it. Perhaps it was just the peculiarity of the whole situation so far. I sat back in my chair, took my pipe out of the top drawer, and began to fill it. Its ends with tobacco. For one was allowed to smoke indoors at this point in Britain. "5 minutes. I lit my pipe, popped it into my mouth, and gestured he sit down in a chair next to my desk, where he did, and I let him speak. Oh, how do I? I've been here before. Well, not in this situation, but at this school. At this time, I've lived through this before. Have you ever seen the film Groundhog Day? I shook my head. Oh well, have you ever thought about going back in time? Back to an earlier point, but as you are now, traveling back to redo some of your life with the knowledge you have now? Well, that's what's happened to me. Only I can't control it, and I can't stop it. He sat back a little further in the chair now. His face began grim as he looked out of a window across the room. I lived my life normally until my 13th birthday, and then I woke up a 4-year-old back in a house I hadn't lived in for 24 years. Sounds great being young again, getting to go back and to do things better, but it's a nightmare. The first time, though, I showed up, I'd been a doctor of philosophy before I went back. I could do advanced mathematics, quote Shakespeare, play the piano. It was fun. I was a prodigy. But all the attention I got for me got taken away from my younger brother. He wasn't the same brother I'd known before. And what was worse, for the first time, I saw his eyes become glazed, and piercing voice began to tremble. With so much time and effort put into me, my parents never had any more children. I had another brother and sister before, and suddenly they didn't exist. And it was because of me. I tried to tell people about what was going on, but it's a hard thing to prove. I'd tell them sports results that hadn't happened yet, warn them about natural disasters. When it became apparent that my predictions were right, I was taken off to study, drugged into a white-walled room. You can't imagine how long 20 years can take in a padded cell. He went silent for a moment, staring blankly out of the window. Then his eyes came back to me. But it happened again. I woke up one morning in my parents' house, 26 years younger. That second time round, my parents had 2 more children, but they weren't the brother and sister that I should have had. They were different, and the others were gone. Now, if I try to get the first ones back, I'm writing 2 other kids out of existence. You can't imagine the guilt. He stood up then, walked over to look at me over the desk. His head only just reached over it so he could see me. Now I need your help. This is my 12th time. I think I can make it right. If I can keep everything the way it was supposed to be, maybe it'll go on. Maybe I won't have to keep doing this. I wasn't supposed to be sent here. You aren't supposed to talk to my mother about this. Look, he grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and began scribbling down something. He handed it over. After a moment, I forgot what he had written exactly. Something extremely complex looking mathematical proof. No 10-year-old should know this stuff. He grabbed another sheet of paper and started furiously writing again. He handed Names, dates, events. He passed it to me. I knew it. I know it sounds crazy now, but just look. These are all things yet to come. You'll see. Take it. Bet on the results, make some money, but please, don't interfere now or again. You aren't supposed to be involved in this. I remember only a little of the conversation after that. It was ridiculous. What he was saying and how I could possibly believe it. I told him to stop talking such nonsense and sent him back to class. I called his mother into my office. When she came to collect him and told her about his misbehaving, his strange outbursts. I kept the list though. I'm not sure why I did it, but I kept it, safely filed away in my study room. I read in a paper a few years later that Chris had killed himself. Around the time he told me his second brother would be born. I learned later that his mother had a miscarriage. I worry now whether that was my doing. Maybe if I'd done as he asked, things would have gone differently. Who knows? What effect that conversation with her had? It is now the afternoon of July 21st, 2017, the day before Chris would be due to turn 30. Everything on that list, the boy furiously scribbled down that day, has happened. World Cup victories, hurricanes, the bombing of the Twin Towers over the U.S., everything, just as he wrote it. But now my thoughts turn to tomorrow. What happens to me? What happens to my daughter, my grandchildren? If everything goes back so he can live through it again, where do we go? Do we carry on without him? Or will we just never wake up? Just disappear? I've lived a long life, and I've done a great many things, but none haunt me so much as that conversation, and I've never felt as much dread as I do today. If we really do start over, I hope I listen the next time, though.